They told you that American medicine is built on genius, on the best minds, on the brightest people rising to the top through hard work and talent. That is the story they want you to believe. But here is what they left out. Some of the most brilliant minds in the history of American medicine were never allowed through the front door. One man, no college degree, no medical license, paid the salary of a janitor. He invented a surgery that saved thousands of children's lives. He trained a generation of surgeons who went on to lead departments across this country. And the institution that built its entire reputation on his work put his name on a payroll next to mops and brooms. His name was Vivian Thomas. And by the time this story is done, you will understand exactly why you have never heard of him, and exactly what Johns Hopkins University owed him from the day he walked through their back door. That is not a figure of speech. He had to use the back door. But here is what makes this story different from every other erasure story you have ever heard. They could not keep him out. They could not keep him down. And eventually, the very surgeons Hopkins celebrated had to come back, stand in a room, and publicly admit that the man they classified as a janitor was the greatest surgical mind any of them had ever seen. Hold on to that, because we are about to go all the way back to the beginning. It is 1929. Vivian Thomas is 19 years old. He is sharp, disciplined, and ready. He has spent years working carpentry jobs alongside his father, saving every dollar. He is enrolled and set to start college at Tennessee Agricultural and Industrial College in Nashville, what is now Tennessee State University. He has a plan. He is going to become a doctor. Everything is lined up. Then the banks fail. Not a slow decline, not a setback. One morning, the money is simply gone. The Nashville bank where Thomas kept his savings collapsed. Every dollar he had earned and saved for years wiped out overnight. The stock market crash of 1929 did not just take Wall Street money. It took the future of a 19-year-old black boy in Nashville who had done everything right. College was gone. Medical school was gone. The plan was gone. Picture how that feels. You followed every rule. You worked the honest work. You saved the honest savings. And in one morning, a system that was never built for you proves it does not care whether you make it or not. Most people would have quit dreaming right there. Vivian Thomas was not most people. Within months, he found a job at Vanderbilt University Medical School as a laboratory assistant, working under a surgeon named Alfred Blaylock. The pay was barely enough to survive on. Some sources put his early wages at around $12 a week, less than a carpenter earned at the time. His official job classification? Janitor. Not lab technician, not research assistant, janitor. But here is what they were not ready for. On his very first day, Thomas assisted Blaylock with a surgical experiment on a dog, and something happened that no one expected. Thomas did not just assist, he understood. He watched with the kind of focus that comes from a mind built for this. Within days, he was performing arterial punctures on laboratory dogs, measuring and administering anesthesia. Within a month, he was setting up experiments and executing delicate, complex operations on his own. Let that land. Within 1 month, a man classified as a janitor was doing the work of a trained surgical researcher. He taught himself suturing techniques. He modified surgical equipment because the tools on hand were too large for the procedures he needed to perform. He sharpened needles on an emery board when nothing else fit. He did not have textbooks for this. He did not have a professor standing over him. He figured it out. And by the mid-1930s, Vivian Thomas was doing the work of a postdoctoral researcher at Vanderbilt University and being paid the wage of a man who cleaned the floors. But the full picture is even bigger than that, and we are just getting started. In 1941, Alfred Blaylock received one of the most prestigious offers in American surgery. Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, one of the most famous medical institutions in the world, wanted him to become their chief of surgery. Blaylock accepted, but he had one firm condition. Vivian Thomas had to come with him. Hopkins agreed. Thomas packed up his family and moved to Baltimore. And what he found there was worse than Nashville. Baltimore in 1941 was brutally segregated. Every black employee at Johns Hopkins Hospital held one of two positions: janitor or maintenance worker. That was it. There was no category for what Vivian Thomas was. So the institution did what institutions do when they want to use you without acknowledging you. They gave him the classification that fit their comfort, not his reality. He was listed on the payroll as a janitor. He was required to enter through the back of the building. He was told not to wear his white lab coat in the public hallways of the hospital. At Johns Hopkins, a black man in a white coat was apparently too disruptive to the order of things. And here is where I need you to hold that image. The very coat that said to the world, this person belongs here. This person has authority. This person is a scientist. That coat was treated like a threat when Vivian Thomas wore it, because it told the truth they were not ready to tell. Now hold this thought for a second. And this is exactly how they do it. They use a man's genius and deny his humanity at the same time. Hey family, real talk. YouTube has shut down channels for telling exactly these kinds of stories. So I need you to find us off this platform. Go to blackstories-untold.com, join our mailing list, and make sure we stay connected no matter what they do. Now, back to what happened next. In 1943, a pediatric cardiologist named Helen Taussig walked into Blaylock's office with a problem that was killing children. The condition was called tetralogy of Fallot, blue baby syndrome. You need to understand what this actually was, because it is the heart of everything that follows. Babies born with this defect had 4 simultaneous problems with their hearts. Blood that was supposed to go to the lungs to pick up oxygen was being rerouted. So these children came into the world starved of oxygen. Their skin turned blue. Some of them could barely walk across a room without collapsing. Most of them did not live past childhood. Taussig had been watching these children die for years. She believed that surgery could fix the problem by rerouting the blood flow. But she did not know exactly how. She brought the idea to Blaylock, and Blaylock brought it to Thomas. What Blaylock asked Thomas to do was almost impossible. Before any surgery could be attempted on a human child, someone had to prove the procedure was survivable. That meant recreating the exact heart defects in a living animal, and then demonstrating that a corrective surgery could be performed without killing the patient. On a dog's heart, with precision measured in millimeters. Using instruments, Thomas often had to modify himself because nothing was built for work this delicate. Thomas spent nearly 2 years on this. He worked through approximately 200 dogs. 200. He studied infant heart specimens at the Hopkins Pathology Museum to understand the anatomy he was trying to recreate. He refined the suturing technique until it was exact. He proved that the corrective procedure was survivable. He built the entire clinical foundation for the surgery from the ground up. And this is where everything connects. Blaylock had performed this procedure on a dog exactly 1 time. Once, as Thomas's assistant. Thomas had performed it hundreds of times. When the moment came to operate on a human child, the man with the most knowledge, the most experience, and the steadiest hands in that building was Vivian Thomas. November 29th, 1944. The patient was a 15-month-old infant named Eileen Saxon. She was blue. She was dying. The operating room at Johns Hopkins was full. Chief surgical resident William Longmire was there. A young surgical intern named Denton Cooley was there, a man who would later become one of the most famous cardiac surgeons in the world. And at Alfred Blaylock's personal request, Vivian Thomas was there, standing on a step stool, because the table was too high and no one had thought to adjust it for the man who had to stand at the surgeon's shoulder and guide every move. Thomas stood on that step stool behind Blaylock and coached him through the operation. Every cut, every suture, every moment where Blaylock turned and asked, "Is that all right, Vivian? Are the bites close enough together?" Thomas answered, because Thomas was the one who knew. The first surgery on Eileen Saxon extended her life, but did not save it permanently. She was too fragile, and the procedure was new. But the team pressed forward. The second operation on an 11-year-old girl was a complete success. She left the hospital 3 weeks later. The third, on a 6-year-old boy, produced a moment that no one in that room ever forgot. At the end of the surgery, As the blood flow was corrected, the boy's color changed. Right there on the table, blue to pink. A child came back to life in front of their eyes. Within a year of that first surgery, more than 200 children have been operated on at Johns Hopkins using the same procedure. Parents were traveling from thousands of miles away, bringing their blue children to Baltimore because word had spread that death could now be turned back. That miracle had one man's hands at the center of it. And then came the paper. In May 1945, the Journal of the American Medical Association published the report on the blue baby surgeries. The authors were Alfred Blalock and Helen Taussig. The procedure was named the Blalock-Taussig shunt. Vivian Thomas was not mentioned. Not once. Not in the paper. Not in the credits. Not in the acknowledgments. On December 31st, 1945, Time magazine ran a story celebrating the breakthrough. They wrote about Blalock. They wrote about Taussig. The man who had spent 2 years developing the procedure, who had stood on a step stool guiding the surgeon's hands, who had trained every person in that room, did not appear in the article. His name was not there. His face was not in the photos. Meanwhile, Thomas continued working. He continued training. The surgeons he trained became famous. They became chiefs of departments. They became the people Johns Hopkins pointed to with pride. And at Blalock's faculty parties, when the celebrated doctors gathered to toast their achievements, Vivian Thomas was sometimes there too. Not as a colleague, not as the man who made it all possible. He was behind the bar, serving drinks to surgeons he had taught earlier that same day. Denton Cooley, the man who went on to become one of the world's greatest cardiac surgeons, later told Washingtonian magazine exactly what he thought of Vivian Thomas. He said, "Even if you'd never seen surgery before, you could do it because Vivian made it look so simple. There wasn't a false move, not a wasted motion when he operated." And then Cooley said something that should be printed on the wall of every surgical school in America. He said, "Dr. Blalock was a great scientist, a great thinker, a leader, but by no stretch of the imagination could he be considered a great cutting surgeon. Vivian was." The man they put behind the bar was the greatest cutting surgeon in the building, and they knew it. They just were not willing to say it out loud. Alfred Blalock died on September 15, 1964, at the age of 65. Thomas fell into a deep depression after losing the man who had been his complicated, contradictory partner for 34 years. Blalock had fought for Thomas's pay. He had insisted Thomas be in the operating room. He had called Thomas his equal in private. But he had also accepted every public honor without fighting for Thomas's name to be next to his. He had watched the system erase Thomas and had not burned it down in protest. That is a complicated grief to carry. Thomas stayed at Hopkins. He continued training surgeons. He continued his work in the laboratory. And then, in 1968, something happened that Hopkins did not engineer and could not have predicted. The surgeons Thomas had trained, men who were now chiefs of surgical departments across the entire country, decided they were done staying quiet. They commissioned a portrait of Vivian Thomas, oil on canvas, painted by artist Bob G. And on February 27, 1971, they packed a Hopkins auditorium and hung that portrait in the lobby of the Alfred Blalock Clinical Sciences Building, right next to the portrait of Blalock himself. The man who had been forced to enter through the back door of that institution now looked out from its walls. The man whose name was left off the paper, left out of the magazine, left behind the bar, now hung in the place of highest honor Johns Hopkins had to offer. And it was not Hopkins that put him there. It was the surgeons he had quietly, brilliantly, undeniably shaped. They came back for him. Dr. Rollins Hanlon, former president of the American College of Surgeons, stood in that room and called Thomas's impact on surgery enormous. Rowena Spencer, one of the first female pediatric surgeons in the country, trained by Thomas, said it plainly. "Many times during my career, I was complimented on my surgical technique, and I will admit that a good many people were shocked when I told them that I learned my surgical technique from a black man who had only a high school education." In 1976, 37 years after he first walked through the back door of Johns Hopkins Hospital, the university gave Vivian Thomas an honorary doctorate. He was appointed instructor of surgery on the faculty of the School of Medicine. After nearly 4 decades, Johns Hopkins finally said out loud what everyone in every operating room had known since 1944. Thomas retired in 1979. He died of pancreatic cancer on November 26, 1985. His autobiography, Partners of the Heart, was published just days after he passed. In 1989, a journalist named Katie McCabe at Washingtonian Magazine wrote a feature article about his life called Like Something the Lord Made. It won the 1990 National Magazine Award for feature writing. In 2003, PBS aired a documentary also called Partners of the Heart. In 2004, HBO released a film called Something the Lord Made. Mos Def, now known as Yassine Bey, played Vivian Thomas, and Alan Rickman played Blaylock. The film won the 2004 Emmy for Outstanding Made-for-Television Movie. In 2005, Johns Hopkins named one of its 4 medical school colleges after him. The procedure is now formally known as the Blaylock-Thomas-Taussig shunt. Here is what this story actually means, and this is the part that matters beyond one man and one institution. Johns Hopkins did not accidentally forget Vivian Thomas. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work. It extracted every drop of his genius. It built a reputation on his research, his technique, and his teaching. It named buildings after the men who received credit for his work. It celebrated a surgery he invented as proof of white medical brilliance, and it classified him as a janitor so that no one in the building would have to look at him and reckon with what he actually was. That is not an oversight. That is a machine. And this machine did not only run at Hopkins, it ran everywhere. It ran in every research lab, every hospital, every university where Black genius was used and Black names were buried. The reason you did not learn about Vivian Thomas in school is not because he was unimportant. It is because his story tells the truth about how American institutions actually work. They take what they need from Black people and then rewrite the story so the credit goes somewhere else. But here is what they could not control. They could not undo what he had built. They could not untrain the surgeons who learned from him. They could not take back the hands that bore his technique. They could not erase him from the memory of every doctor who had stood in his laboratory and watched him work and known, really known, that they were watching something they would never fully replicate. Levi Watkins Jr., the first Black cardiac resident at Hopkins, eulogized Thomas and called him the most untalked about, unappreciated, unknown giant in the African American community. He was right, and we are fixing that now. Vivian Thomas walked through the back door of Johns Hopkins and built the foundation of modern cardiac surgery with his bare hands. They put him on the janitor's payroll. He humiliated them with his excellence anyway. And eventually, the institution had to come back and hang his face on the wall, because the alternative was admitting that everything they built was built on a lie. That is not a small story. That is the whole story. This was Black Stories Untold. And as always, thanks for watching. If you want more stories like this, click the video on your screen now.